Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Christopher Dustin, and I'm going to do an introduction to photometry with the intent of teaching my astronomy students how to do basic photometry, that is measuring the brightness of sources. So specifically, I'm interested in light curve photometry, so that is how the brightness of sources vary over some time period. Now, photometry is really kind of an art as well as a science because there's lots and lots of details that go into actually determining the brightness of sources. I don't intend to give you like a complete overview of the field. And specifically, I'm going to be doing differential photometry, not all sky photometry. So there's another kind of photometry called all sky. We really focus on differential photometry. And I'm also going to be focusing just on using this program, AstroImageJ, which is typically what we use in the group. There are some restrictions on how we use this program. If you really want to get the details of photometry, you actually need to go on to some other things, like working on Python and that kind of thing. IRAF, those kind of programs allow you to do more detailed photometry, but we really just want to get through doing light curve photometry. So I'm going to load in some test images. So when you're doing photometry, you may, at doing light curves, you may have a set of images where you want to get you have like an image every 1 minute or an image every 1 hour or even an image every 1 day. I'm doing an image I think this was a 60-second exposures over the course of 1 night. So I'm going to have a bunch of images that are done over 1 night. Your science goals may be different, but light curve photometry kind of doesn't care how long each image is or how far separate they are. It's just going to spit out some answers too. So I'm going to be doing NY-LUP is my source. This is a cataclysmic variable star. I'm going to use it because I know that it works well for this particular video. You're going to see all the things are going to work well. Sometimes things don't work well, and that might be a specific case for your observations, but I want to do an example where everything works pretty well. So I'm going to load an image sequence. That's the directory where all my images are located. Remember, you may need to put in a filter if you only want to pick out a particular filter or a particular set of images, but all the images in my directory I want to use, so there are 24 of them, and I'm just going to click OK, and AstroImageJ is going to open them. Okay, cool, 24. I'm going to assume that your images have the WCS. You may need to do other things. You may want to, if you have like 4 images per day of a supernova, you may need to stack all 4 together before you do this step. I'm assuming that each image has a WCS. We can even check that they're aligned. Actually, yeah, that's one great thing about AstroImageJ. It doesn't even matter if they are actually aligned. You can see there are a little bit of shift in the images as I flip through them. As long as they have a WCS, this approach that I'm going to take is going to work. And that's another reason why I'm picking this approach, is because I know it is actually going to work. Okay, so I've got my images loaded up. I know what the source is. It's going to be NY-LUP, and now I'm ready to go on to actually doing photometry. So the first thing we want to do is find comparison stars. So we're doing differential photometry. That means that somewhere in here is our unknown source, meaning it is like changing in brightness over the time period in question. And I want to find out the magnitude of that source as it changes in brightness. And the way we do this is we have some other selections of stars in the image that we know the magnitude of, and we know they're going to be relatively constant. So how do you find those comparison stars is the first step. This is actually complicated. So I'm going to do it for this source, which I know is easy. For your source, it might be more complicated. But the easiest thing to do, and actually really the best thing to do, is to go to this website, AAVSO, Variable Star Observatory, Observers. Here we go. American Association of Variable Star Observers is the AAVSO. They have sequences. So they have, for every particular variable star, they have a set of stars that they know are constant in brightness and work as good standard stars. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go down to tools and observer. So if you know what you're doing, you might be able to just pick a star, create a finder chart, whatever. I'm going to go to tools and observer resources because I want to go to the search page, which is VSX, variable star index. All their variable stars are in there. So I'm going to click search. And for my particular case, I can type NY-LUP and click search, and this is going to work. Notice that you can put in AUID, you can put in coordinates, capture coordinates. For unknown sources, you're going to have to put in the coordinates, but for sources that are known, like this guy, NY-LUP is fine, so I'm going to click search there. This gives a bunch of data on the source, including the unique identifier, constellation, coordinates, all kinds of stuff. What I care about is the sequence. So that's right here. So I'm going to click that sequence button. And now we're going to have a whole bunch of options for the field size, the size of the actual field of view. This is kind of a convenience, but it's also nice to try to match the chart that you're going to look at with the field of view that you have. So the way I do this is I go to these came from my telescope, so I know they are about 1/2 degree or 1 degree fields of view, but you can see you have size bars here. So you can check the size of the image by zooming out sufficiently and then being like, oh, okay, how big is the thing? Okay, so it's like 30 arc minutes. So that's a size E. So I'm going to click size E because that's about as big as my field. Pop up. Okay, cool. So here's a chart, which we hope is going to match the image over here. First thing to check is to make sure the orientation is right. We have north, up, east, left. But if we look at, that's in our observation, but if we look at our chart, we actually have east, right, north, down. So notice those are kind of hard to see, but that's what they are. So the orientation is not correct. We can fix that by going to plot another chart. It goes back to sort of this page, which we skipped over by doing a direct search. And you can see that I can change the chart orientation. We used a CCD to take these images, so it probably was set on visual. Let's change it to CCD and do plot chart. You can also change the scale. You can put in actual coordinates here. So there's a lot of stuff that you can put into this thing. Okay, so now we have north up, east to the left. We should be oriented correctly. So let's try to find a couple of star patterns. Cool, I see one right here. So I see a star there, double star, and a star there looking for bright sort of arcs. That is here too. Star there, double star there, star there. That looks good. You can see the source is indicated by that cross. So I need to locate that source. I've got my sort of 4 stars right there and 4 stars right there. There's a distinctive pattern in the middle of the image. And of course, we think the source is in the middle of the image. And you can actually see that pattern, that 1, 2, 3, 4 stars here, 1, 2, 3, 4 stars in the comparison star, the sequence as well. So cool. You can zoom in by clicking on it. I'm actually going to zoom in here too to the source. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and the source is actually the empty cross. So the source is not indicated on the sequence. That's pretty typical. 1, 2, 3, 4, my source is right there. So first thing to do is to make sure you can identify the source in your sequence or your finder chart. Cool. So the source is there. Very good. The numbers on the finder chart indicate the brightness. Now, the numbers happen to be multiplied by 100. So when it says 137, it means that star has a magnitude of 13.7. 14.4, 15.2. So just to be aware of that, I don't know why they do that, but they do. I guess because points look like stars, they might get confused, whatever. Okay, so what we need to do is identify in our image some of the comparison stars. So this can be tricky or it can be easy. In this case, it's relatively easy. I'm going to pick, see this like little 1, 2, 3, 4 star pattern. That's pretty easy to pick out in this image. So I'm going to use that star that's indicated there as a comparison right there. 13.3 is the magnitude of that star. And then this bright star up here, that's in this upper corner. There's 2 stars right there, 14.4 and 15.2. That's 14.4, that's 15.2. So I'm just going to pick 14.4. So those are going to be my 2 comparison stars. I like using 2. Generally, smaller is a little bit better than larger numbers, meaning that if you using 2, we've shown is generally better than using like 4 or 5 or 6. But that's one of the things that's a little bit of an art to photometry. So I'm just going to pick 2 for the purposes of this video. Using 2 is generally accepted to be like a reasonable choice. So 133 and 14.4. Just a quick discussion about magnitudes if you're not aware of them. The brightness of stars is measured as magnitudes, and you have to be a little bit careful because the magnitude scale goes backwards. Bigger magnitudes means dimmer stars. So that's why this 133 is a little brighter than this 144, a little bigger in the image means brighter. So 13.3 is a brighter star than 14.4. Just be a little aware of that. Okay, so to actually take these, the data here, to actually analyze it, we need to tell AstroImageJ where the source pixels are and where the background pixels are. So what AstroImageJ is going to do automatically, it's going to say, okay, everything, I want to tell it, so my little circles here, the inside circle, that smaller circle, is saying to AstroImageJ, that's the source. So I've centered it on my source there. So the source is inside the smallest circle. But of course, you can see the background image has a bunch of counts too. So if I go in there and I look at this value and this peak up here, I can see that In the center of my image, the value is about 1200. So the center, so that means that 1200 photons fell on the central pixel of this star. But if I go off the source, you can see that the background has 386 or 400 or so. So the background is about 400 and the actual source is about 1200. So clearly we want to subtract out the background. The way you subtract out the background is to use the outer ring. So the small circle gives you your source. That next ring is skipped completely. That's to separate the source from the background. And then the outer ring is the actual background that AstroImageJ uses to subtract. The first thing we need to do is to identify what sizes of circles to use. And AstroImageJ gives us a few tools to do that. First thing we're going to do is plot a seeing profile so we can see, based on the circles that we have right now, what AstroImageJ thinks is the best size for the circle. So this is a shift click, holding shift on clicking on the source. And I get a single line in my measurements table. And to get the actual seeing profile, I'm going to go analyze plot seeing profile. So what AstroImageJ is doing is it's trying to tell you what it thinks the best sizes of the circles actually are. So let's look at what it suggests. So it has what's called the full width at half max. So that's saying, so how big the source is on the image is 5.96 pixels. That's a radius. So what it's saying is that if you go out to, see, here's the pixels on the bottom. If you go out to 5.96, you will get basically the entire source. So full width at half max says how big the source is at half the maximum. So AstroImageJ says, okay, now that I know the full width at half max, I have an algorithm that allows me to make sure that the number of pixels in the source region and the number of pixels in the background region are the same. And so it's suggesting a radius, the inner radius of 12, a background initial radius of 21, and then a background radius of 31. So it's suggesting that these three circle sizes should be 12, 21, and 31. Now, you can see that the plot here has a bunch of crap happening here, a bunch of extra, not noise, it's actually the sizes of the pixels that counts in the pixels because it's getting hit by this bigger star. So just to try to illustrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into AstroImageJ, set the radii to be 12, 21, and 31, and show you what's happening. So first, I'm going to erase all the stuff from the table, erase. So that erased the apertures and erase the table too. And then I'm going to set the radii of the circles using the set button. And I'm going to change it to the recommended ones, which are 12, 21, and 31. Click OK. And you can see my radius change. So now my circles are a certain size, and this is what is recommended by AstroImageJ. So the problem here is that AstroImageJ selected those things by some algorithm which didn't take into account what was actually happening in the image. If we look at the image, if I use this source size, you can see that I would pick out, okay, so everything in the inner circle does appear to be the source I care about, but the outer circle is hitting the bright star, which is next to the source that I care about. That's not background, right? That's another source. So that outside ring is actually a terrible choice to use for this photometry, because it's going to say, oh, this is the background, when in fact it's not the background, it's another source, right? So the first thing we have to do is make sure that we notice that the recommendation in this case from AstroImageJ is bad, right? So what we should do is change the sizes of the rings to something that our eyes say, oh, looks good, and then try to play with it a little bit. So I'm going to first say, okay, what I'm going to do to try to skip over that source is I'm going to make the middle ring as big as the outer ring. In fact, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than the outer ring, and then I'm going to make the outer ring even bigger so that I'm totally skipping that bright source. So let me try to do that. So let's go to set. Okay, so I want this guy to be even bigger than that one. So I'm going to try like 25. Sorry, no, I want this one to be like 35, bigger than the outer ring. So even bigger than that guy to make sure I totally skip that bright source. And then I'll pick like 45 for this one, and let's see what that looks like. So that's what that looks like. Actually, that looks pretty good, right? So I'm now picking out all the sources in the middle. I'm skipping all the middle ring, and then I'm only using the outer ring as background. So to me, to my eye, that looks good. So this is the first step, an initial set of rings for photometry. Now, we really shouldn't just use this. We should do some basic analysis to check to see if this is a good choice. And the way that we check is you want to do something which is maximizing the signal to noise ratio of our choices. So signal to noise ratio tells you what it says, which is signal is good, noise is bad. So you want the ratio of the signal to noise to be as large as possible. I can shift click right now, and my measurement table will show me not only those three choices, you have to scroll over a bit, 12, 35, 45, that's the choices that I made. It will also show me my signal to noise right there. Source signal to noise is 100. We've probably talked before, signal to noise, you want like 100 is one gold standard. So if you've hit 100, you're kind of good. 50 is kind of a minimum. Below 50 is sort of possible, but you start getting higher and higher errors. But you really want the signal to noise to be as large as possible. So one way that you modify this is you find something that your eye looks is good, which is this, and then you start playing around a little bit to see if you can make that signal to noise as big as possible. And the way you do this, keep the measurement table open. You can erase the apertures if you want or not. That's your personal preference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the apertures, I think, and then just change the sizes of the circles by a little bit at a time. And so what I'm going to do first, I'm not going to show you all of the process I'm using, but one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be like, okay, first, let's try to shrink the radius of the inside one by 2 pixels. Click OK, do another shift click there. You can see that that actually increased the signal to noise by quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. And actually, at this point, I'm going to fast forward the video. So I'm going to start playing with the inner and the outer circles and get a whole list of things, and then go back and decide which source size, which sizes of the aperture circles to use. Okay, so let me show you what some of the process that I did. So here's all of the various source radii I tried, sky, and that this is the sky radius and the sky radius min and the max. So in there, in between there is the background, that's the source. You can see first I tried changing the source radius down to 6.864 while keeping the other things constant. And I got a signal to noise ratio that increased right there, 100, 110, 120, 127. But then when I went too far, it dropped again to 120. So I went back to 127, and then I set the inner source radius to be 6, because that seemed to be where the signal to noise ratio was maximized. Then what I did is I changed the size of the min and max sky radius. And you can see that my signal to noise got better, but not significantly better. So here's the source signal to noise. I got back to 127, 128, 128, 128. So really shrinking the size of the source radius was the best thing to do for this particular set of images. And once I hit a signal to noise ratio of about 128, I mean, it increases a little bit there, but that's really not even worth it. So I'm going to use the last one I did, which was 63750. Just make sure it says 63750. Yes, and you can see now that that is my source. That's actually the aperture size I'm going to use. I'm being a little bit careful over here because I don't want my outer ring to hit that other source. But I'm now, well outside that bright guy, and I'm inside that dim guy. So this is actually the aperture size that I'm actually doing. Okay, so now that I've got my signal to noise ratio maximized based on the suggestion from AstroImageJ, I'm now going to go on and actually do this analysis. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the profile. I'm also going to clear the measurement table, the apertures and the measurement table. You really should be careful in clearing the measurement table right before you do this next step. So you might need to clear that a lot. Just watch out for that a little bit. I don't actually, I should leave the chart open. I sometimes print these charts out so I know exactly what I'm doing. I have a big enough screen that I can see everything, but really printing it out or using a tablet or something to see it is sometimes the best approach. So you can make notes to yourself, because you really have to know exactly what stars you're looking at. Otherwise, the whole thing will be nonsense. So, okay, so I want to zoom out so I can see all of the stars I care about. There's my 13.3. There's my 14.4. So what we're going to do here is something that, and just to be a little careful, I really should check to make sure that my aperture sizes are not too big to hit other stars. I'm a little worried about that guy, but for the purposes of this training, I'm just going to go with it, but maybe I should be a little careful about actually getting too close to that other source. This one is totally fine. There are some junk in there. You're just not going to win, right? So I'm just going to let that go. Okay, go back to where I can see everything. Okay, so this is called multi-aperture photometry because you're going to set multiple apertures on the image. So you want to look for the little 2 dots indicating in AstroImageJ that we have multiple apertures. Click that. You get a whole bunch of options. Mostly the defaults are fine, but you do want to be careful. Fixed apertures, meaning use the apertures that I used, that I figured out myself. There are ways of doing variable apertures in AstroImageJ. If anybody wants to explore that, I think they're probably cool, but I'm most comfortable using fixed apertures. Consistency, right? For this next set of options, you want use RA and DEC. We have a WCS, so using the coordinates is always going to be the best way to ensure consistency and allow AstroImageJ to actually pick the apertures in the right place. Auto comparison stars is probably, I've never had success with that. I think that our images are too dim, so don't have that checked. As far as this stuff, you know, these are various that start with this, check the ones on the left, uncheck the ones on the right, but these are sort of options. This is a nice option, halt processing. So if something goes wrong, it stops. Now, maybe you want it to keep going if something goes wrong. So there's options there. But one thing we do want to make sure we have checked, which is prompt to enter reference star apparent magnitude. So that's entering the magnitude of our comparison stars. We want to be able to do that. Update plot to, yeah, I would just leave all this stuff checked. You'll see what's going to happen when we actually run this process. So you see the image, the window says to click place apertures and select aperture locations with left clicks. Yeah, the other thing I guess we want to make sure is check to show the help panel. That reminds us, if we forget what we're doing, how to actually do this step. So place apertures is the next option. Then we get this image. Gives us a whole bunch of clicks and what happens when we make those clicks. Fortunately, we mostly only care about doing what's at the very top, which is add target star aperture T1. You can see that the left click. So go down here, click on that guy, give it a left click, bam. Labels it T1, and it also tells us the total number of counts inside the source. So that's just sort of like a check. It's adding them all up. It got 34,000. Cool. Now up here, our multi-aperture help window says add reference star C2. So now that we've placed our targets, now notice that actually you can do multiple targets, right? So if you want to actually have multiple unknown stars, you can actually do that by doing now shift left click to getting other targets. But we are generally only worried about one target. So one target, now enter comparison stars. C2, add reference star aperture C2. So we can left click to add the aperture. I want to add it on my 13.3. That was that guy right there, left click. You can see it's doing doing 2 different things. It's automatically sending you out to Sinbad so you can search at this location for that star. But that's really only helpful if we don't have the comparison star magnitude already, which we do. We got that from AAVSO. So you can use Sinbad if you want, but really we have it already. It's 13.3. So now you just have to be a little bit careful. Somewhere has popped up a window for me to enter the magnitude. I just can't see it. So I think if I go to multi-aperture help, yeah, see, it's right there. So magnitude entry. So you have to be a little careful. AstroImageJ is popping up all kinds of windows for you, and you just have to make sure to look for them if they're there. So I'm going to enter the C2 magnitude, 13.3. Notice I'm putting the decimal point in. You'll be off by 100 if you don't, by 10, sorry, but whatever, fine, 13.3. Okay. So notice that it actually has labeled that as 13.3. The number of counts is 1.1 e to the 5th, 110,000. And it's even giving us an estimate for the magnitude so far of T1, just based on the magnitude of that star. So cool. But we're going to do 2. Where did my other one go? Okay. It's right there. Let's check that. That guy 14.4, that guy 14.4. Okay, so check our help. It says add reference star aperture C3 is a left click, so I'm gonna left click. Again, it opens Sinbad, but I can go back and I know the magnitude is 14.4, so I gotta find that window again, right there, 14.4. Click OK. Now I can keep doing this if I have a whole bunch of stars in my sequence, but like I said, we've generally found that smaller is usually better. Also, it makes the analysis a little less complicated. So we're going to stick it with that. So we want to know now that we've selected all our apertures, we want to tell AstroImageJ to go through every image and extract the information from that image using those same apertures. You can see up here that is given by enter, finalize aperture selection and start processing. You can also see you can do that with a right click. AstroImageJ is a great program, but it is open source and free, so you have to be a little careful not doing things that you don't have experience with. I click enter, it works, so I'm going to do that. I do think you have to be careful to either have this window selected or that window selected before you do this. But what's going to happen is when I push enter, AstroImageJ is going to extract the information from this image and go on to the next one. It's also going to pop up a whole bunch of plots, and it's going to start plotting stuff for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click enter, show you what happens. So all the plot windows are popping up. That's all great. We're just going to let that happen. I find it sometimes helpful to look at the image as the process is happening to confirm every aperture is hitting the right place. It doesn't look like it's hitting the right place. Okay, it's finished. You can see it went through all 24 of them. So now it's time to go look at the plot that it created. So you sometimes have to like move these windows around. Okay, here is a plot. So the AstroImageJ has some great plotting tools. They occasionally are a little bit so much to deal with. So just let me tell you a little bit about them. This is plotting the right thing. So you can see source AMAG T1. That is actually the magnitude of our target T1. So this is the right thing. It's plotting over the time period in question. It's doing all that automatically. And you can see that the brightness varies kind of all over the place. That's just because that's what this star is actually doing. So that's actually expected for this kind of source. It's varying in a kind of unexpected way. It's generally getting brighter. That might be real or not. We're not going to discuss that at the moment. For the moment, I just want to point out how you can plot other stuff. So if you go to multi-plot Y data, this window, over here, X data and Y data, you can select different things and then select whether you want to plot them or not. So for instance, if I wanted to plot the relative flux SNR, actually, let's not do that. Let's go to source SNR. So that's the actual signal to noise ratio of the source. You can see it's turned the plot on. It's trying to plot both the magnitude, which is like 14 something, and the signal to noise ratio, which is like 1 something. So that's not particularly useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the AMAG there. And it actually looks a little bit weird. I don't know why the source signal to noise rate. Oh, it's normalized. See, it's not even giving us the real value. It's normalizing it. So can I turn off the normalization? No. Input and magnitude. I don't see where I can turn off the normalization. That's kind of a bummer. I'm not going to spend forever trying to figure that out. Maybe the error is better, normalized. Okay, so what this is showing, since it's normalized, it's showing us not what the absolute signal to noise ratio is, but how the signal to noise ratio changes. And you can see the signal to noise ratio, changes pretty, not in a large way, by 8% or something over the image. Anyway, normally what we want to do is we want to look at the source AMAG, the magnitude of the source. So let's put that back on the plot and we can see it's back here. So you can mess with AstroImageJ plotting. Mostly it's a little bit too complicated, but you always have the data you can download to put into your favorite plotting program. It's, again, kind of hard to find. There's the measurement table. So this is all the measurements you could possibly want to download for this source. So let me just real quickly run through a few of them. This is the date. In 2 different formats, JD minus an offset, and this is the absolute JD, the Julian date. Air mass, that's actually the elevation of the source. That can be really critical when trying to figure out how the source is changing as it sets. Some other things, this is our source sky radius min and max. And now we have a whole bunch of relative fluxes of the target and the 2 comparison stars. This is all the stuff that AstroImageJ is using to calculate the magnitudes for us. So I'm just going to skip right through that and get to, here's some positions of the target and the, on the fits image and the, oh God, I don't even know the difference between that one and that one. So, okay, go on. So here's the stuff that we really care about. That's the source minus the sky, total source counts minus the sky counts. This error on the source, and this is the sort of key column, which is the magnitude of the source. That's the thing that that's being plotted up here. If we put this into Excel, that's the column we would want to plot. Sorry, you can save this by going to File, Save As, if you want to save this as some kind of CSV and then upload it to Excel or Google Sheets or whatever. We also have the source signal to noise ratio right here. So this is the thing that I tried to plot, but it gave me some kind of relative answer, which is not particularly relevant. But you can see the signal to noise ratio is above 100. Cool. So this data set, except for like a couple of points, satisfies the gold standard of being over 100 signal to noise ratio. Over 100 signal to noise ratio is under 1% as far as errors go. The actual error is actually listed here, and if you calculated it, this should be under 1%. The over 100 is an estimate for under 1%. So these typically are not exactly within 1%, but it gives you like a rough idea of how good your data is. And then the other thing we probably don't need to look at, the only thing I want to sort of point out is all the stars have magnitude estimates. The calculated one is here, the source AMAG T1, that's the unknown. But if you go over here, you can see that the source AMAG C2 has magnitudes as well, but they're 13.3 because I set them. I said this star definitely is 13.3. I went over here, and this is the second magnitude, 14.4, because I told AstroImageJ it is definitely 14.4. Now, it's possible that there are some issues with picking those comparison stars. If they are saturated, you can't use them as comparisons because the data is lost. If they actually are variable and AAVSO thinks they are actually constant, but they're not, that can be an issue. So AstroImageJ makes an attempt to give you some information about those two stars using this multi-plot reference star settings window. So up here, the fact that these guys are green are saying that, oh, those look like good comparison stars for me, AstroImageJ. If I had picked a random star over here, that color might be orange or it might be red. And that's saying like you really should not be using this star as a comparison star. So this gives us a quick check on whether these stars can be used. You can also do things like select different sets of comparison stars to use. I don't really know how well this works or what it does exactly. So let's try it a little bit. Let's see if I uncheck C3, does the chart change? It vanished and came back. So the chart did change, I think, when I unchecked that C2. But now that is a target, so I don't know what's going to happen if I recheck it. It's going to go back to it. Okay, so yeah, so you can get rid of these and change the analysis by removing them as comparison stars. So that is sometimes helpful if you have like a large set of comparison stars and some of them end up being red, you can get rid of them. But for the moment, I did a good thing. They're all green and they all look like reasonable comparison stars. Okay, so that's basically all the information that I think I can give you, and you can see that this actually took a little bit of time because this stuff is kind of complicated. But what you have now is you have a table, which, you have a plot, which says the brightness of the star over time. Cool. You have a table, which you can download into whatever other spreadsheet program you want to do whatever other analysis you want. But this right here is referred to as the light curve, the magnitude as a function of time. And these are the things that we use to actually understand about these sources, various astronomical things like how their brightness changes, trying to understand the physical mechanisms behind the brightness changing, all that kind of stuff. So this satisfies a good introduction to photometry using AstroImageJ in the simple situations that we are usually dealing with. Obviously, things can get more complicated, and I'm happy to take questions about how to deal with certain situations when sources are very crowded. When you have extended sources like galaxies, you have to do different things. But if we're just looking at point sources, this basically covers this. Okay, thanks very much for watching. I hope that has been helpful instead of just a little bit too lengthy. Obviously, ask me any questions you have, and good luck out there trying to do photometry of these sources. Okay, take it easy. See you later.